Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with legendary jazz pianist, composer, arranger, writer, and educator, the great Hal Galper. He found jazz at the Berklee College of Music in 1955 and went on to work with the best in the business, with cats like Chet and Stan Getz, along with being a member of Phil Woods' quintet for 10 years. He is on the faculty of Berklee College and the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music, and he has taught countless musicians over the years. We talked to him during early May 2020, during the coronavirus lockdown, and he poured over a very good career in jazz. Enjoy.
You hanging in there okay?
Yeah. You know, I got busted for speeding a couple of years ago, and I spent 6 months without a license. I'm kind of used to it. I had some experience with, being kept under house arrest.
Absolutely. Yep, you're a veteran then.
How you doing down there? How you doing where you are? Rough?
It's the same thing. We're all in a ambiguous holding pattern, and we're all waiting for life to get back to some semblance of normality. I mean, Hal, this is the thing. We've been told in the last 2 months to completely undo everything we've known for decades and decades of our lives. We all been told since we're kids, go out, see the world, socialize, shake hands, look in the eyes, and now it's becoming the new norm to not do any of that. So from a psychological standpoint, this is just a level of surreal that words can't even touch.
Yeah, it is. And I can feel the weight of it, too. And the world's never going to be the same because of this, for good and bad, for good and bad,
Right. I hear you.
But, everybody I talk to, all the cats that I talk to, they're all practicing now.
Right,
so
yeah.
Everybody's gone into the shed and they're going to be sounding better.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's the thing out of all of this, is that there's going to be levels of this that there's always a silver lining and all kinds of things. And for the jazz world, man, jazz musicians don't get into it for the money. And ultimately, at the end of the day, jazz musicians are masters of improv. So this new world is probably best suited for jazz artists than anybody else.
Right. Good point.
So, but at the end of the day, what are you doing artistically to keep yourself, positive and hopeful?
I'm doing a lot of archiving of bootleg tapes and VHRs and stuff that I have. I've been working art. Jesus, I just finished 20 VCRs, and I've got about 50 cassettes that I've got to digitalize. So that's keeping me busy. And I had a trio. If you can't believe it, I retired from the New School last December. And I live about 2 hours north of the city in a little country town. It's not even a town. It's a hamlet. But 3 miles from me, there's a slightly bigger town. Guy opened up a jazz club. Actually, he opened up a club for music. So I couldn't believe it, a steady Sunday night trio gig with great cats. And, I can roll out of bed and start playing. It was three minutes away from me. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I got really lucky.
Well, that's the thing that I keep hearing, too, about this new world, even in Kansas City, I don't know how much people around the country realize, but Kansas City was definitely going through a renaissance. Every night, every place, there was all kinds of venues opening up. Bobby Watson had built the program here really, really steadily and got to a point where cats weren't leaving, they were staying, and it was just, it was crazy. I mean, that's the thing. We're all like, wow, I remember before March 12th or 13th, and it's like, yeah, it's a different place now. And when everybody resurfaces, and if they resurface, it's going to be interesting to see how everything kind of pans out.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your beginnings, where you were born and raised, and kind of how you got into jazz.
Oh, gee, all that stuff's in my bio. I can talk about it. I got to talk about it. All right. I was born in Salem. I was 82 this past April 18. I studied classical piano. My mother made me take classical piano when I was really young, and I hated every moment of it. And then it stopped, and I played guitar for a little while, and last year of high school, next to last year of high school, they sent me to a kind of a prep school for engineers in Boston, Copley Square, which is a big mistake on their part because the Boston Jazz Club stable was right across the street. And I was kind of out of place there because everybody had suits and ties and stuff, and I was like into my, I was dressing very loosely. So I'd go over to the stables to have my lunch, and I'd never come back. And I heard a lot of great Serge Shaloff and Dickie Twarsik and Herb Pomeroy and all those cats. And that was the beginning of the end.
So, what was the first live jazz show you ever saw that really blew you away?
At the stable. Well, that's not true. No, that's not true. My good buddy and I, Bob, was a tenor player. We drove into town once. He had a license on a car. I didn't. I think I was probably about 16. And we went to the stables first, and you couldn't get, they wouldn't let us in, but you could stand by the door and hear the music. And I wasn't really listening to it, and I'd heard it before. And then there was a new club that opened up down the street on Huntington Avenue, so we walked down and opened the doors, and the place was, I was young and naive and didn't know anything, and the place was all full of black people, and a lot of smoke and a lot of drinking going on, a lot of happiness happening, and there was this sound coming off the bandstand. It just pushed me back out the door. It wasn't until many years later, maybe a few years ago, that I found out that was Miles's first quintet with Coltrane and Philly Joe. Yeah. And I have a poster of it. I have the guy, a good Boston historian, he found the poster for the gig. So I was actually able to date it. So that was it. That was, I think, the quintet's first gig, and that's where Miles hooked up with Ahmad Jamal, because Ahmad was playing in Soul Town at the same time. I never got to hear him. I didn't even know about him until later, but I think that was my first. No, even before that, George Shearing is the first live performance I heard. I had a date and I took it. Yeah. And I had front row seat. Unfortunately, he farted on the bandstand.
Wow, that's quite a collection. Man.
Made it very difficult to enjoy the experience. I understand he was known for that. But that was my first live. And actually, that's what got me started in the music. My brother was a waiter in Massachusetts, and he purloined a George Shearing album without the cover and brought it back to me, and it was called Changing with the Times. And that was the album that did it. I said, "Mother, this is what I want." This is when I realized that I wanted to be a president. So it must have happened before my sophomore year. And there was a tune on there called Changing with the Times that was in different time signatures, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know enough about beats, times, and bars or anything. So many years later, in the late 80s, I'm with Phil Wiz's quintet, and we're touring, making a festival, a big festival tour with a bunch of people on it in Tokyo, and Shearing's duo was on the bill. So I went up to George. I said, "George, your album, Changing with the Times, was the album that made me realize I wanted to play jazz." I said, "There was a tune on there called Changing with the Times that I couldn't figure out." I said, "Could you show it to me?" And he says, "Give me a couple of days and I'll get back to you." So we're every night going to a different town, a concert hall in a different town, and I get a message that George is calling me to see him at the sound check. So I go over to Phil's wife and borrow her cassette player, and George shows me this. And I thought it was an E flat, but I guess my record player was a little slow, and it was in the key of E, of all keys. And he played it for me. showed me how to voice the voicings, and then played a couple of dynamite choruses on it in the key of E. And when he was done, he jumped up out of his chair and looked at me and said, "Any questions?" So the circle was closed, and I have a copy of that cassette of him showing me that tune. And my girlfriend Lillian found a pristine copy of that album about 3 months ago at an auction, and I have it framed up on my wall now, changing with the time.
Wow, that's wonderful, man.
Yeah.
So when you started out really becoming a professional, were you nervous on stage, or was it like a natural extension of who you are?
Well, that's a good question. I can't ever remember being nervous on stage, but I'm sure I must have, because I rechanneled that into competitiveness. Whenever I felt nervous, I figured I'd take advantage of the energy and turn it around. Plus, I knew how to beat stage fright. I'd come up with my own system for it, which got published in a bunch of different places, Downbeat and Berklee College magazine and stuff. So I don't remember being. I probably was, but I don't remember being it. Most of the time I just feel challenged, instead of nervous.
What did you learn over all of those years as a musician that helped you as a teacher?
Boy, that's a big question. In 25 years or less?
I don't think so.
That's a big question. I guess applying my own experience, I've kind of always been good at analyzing. We spend most artists, no matter what kind of art they're doing, they spend most of the time in a subjective state, not objective, because we're the instrument. Where all the training resides and everything. I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. Oh, I got very good at analyzing my feelings and what was going on, because I remember when I was going to Berklee, walking down the street, asking myself the question, what's supposed to be going on inside of me when I'm playing? So I think that question has never stopped. And since then, I have, I wrote the book Forward Motion and stuff like that. I discovered, and I'm very interested in the science behind music. So I think that question is probably the one that was the most important in my career, in my teaching. So I can tell other people what's supposed to be going on inside of them when they're playing.
What's the most pleasurable thing about being a musician, about performing live?
Fun. If you're not having fun, no sense in doing it. And actually, that's the way you beat stage fright, because what happens with one of the problems with stage fright that occur is over time you get separated from your initial motivation to play. And everybody I asked says the same thing. What was your initial motivation to play? And they all said to have fun, or to get girls, one or the other, or both. If you're not having fun, you can't play. You're not playful. You're not offhanded. You can't touch your creative parts of your brain and get them cranked up. And it's as simple as that. If you lose contact with your basic reason for playing, then it affects you. You're disconnected. You're less secure. You don't feel quite as grounded. But as long as you're having fun, you're going to have a good time. You'll be surprised by your own playing, and the audience will be surprised, and you'll play stuff you never thought you knew. And I think that's probably the answer to most of the stage fright is you got to have fun.
Yeah,
that's it.
So, as a practitioner of jazz and a teacher of jazz, you clearly love it. So, tell me, why do you love jazz?
Well, seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Why? That's. I don't think I could give you an answer on that. I don't know if that should be analyzed. As a matter of fact, I just love it. Sometimes I hate it, but most of the time I love it.
Yeah.
That's another question. very broad.
Yeah,
I just
no,
love to play. It's fun. I love to have fun. I love to play. And I enjoy the communication, connection with the audience, and the listeners.
Absolutely.
We all have a good time leaving the earth, for a few minutes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So everyone is going to get back to live music at some point, and I want to know from you, what do you hope both musician and the crowd gets from this absence of live jazz?
Well, everybody's practicing, so by the time this is over, the whole scene is going to be better. I hope, because everybody's practicing now. They got time to do it, and they got no excuses not to.
Yeah.
So if everybody is practicing, then the whole level of the music scene should improve, I would think. Yeah,
I would too. What do you hope the audience gets, though? What do you hope they come back realizing after this?
When things get tough, music is usually the solace. Like during the Second World War, and the First World War, those were the times where music really blossomed. So I think it may blossom again after this. And those previous periods, they blossomed while it was happening, and that's not possible now, of course. But I expect people will realize how important psychologically and emotionally music, the transcendental experience of music and art, offer you. Relief. I think it's going to be better.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'm the eternal optimist, though.
Yeah, well, that's good. This is the time to be an eternal optimist. So let me ask you this. What did you learn over the years being around legends and luminaries? What did they teach you about not only jazz, but living?
Don't try to live like them. Can you, these are, what did I learn? Musically, you mean, or personally about life?
Well, yeah, I guess, there's things that you're going to pick out as a musician, and there's also going to be lessons that you're going to learn that are going to reverberate throughout all of your life.
I learned mostly what not to do. My mentors were from the earlier scenes where there was a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol and a lot of misbehaving, and there still is that, but not to the degree that it used to be. It was very destructive. The musicians, most of them died from overdoses or cirrhosis of the liver. I used to drink when I was young, but I stopped because it was hurting my playing. So I learned my lessons from them. That, at least in terms of life, take care of yourself and realize that you're here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to play the music and get better. And that's it. And keep to a straight and narrow path. So I guess it gave me discipline.
Right on.
If I had to find one word, it would be discipline.
So I'm going to save the toughest one for last, and I want to know this. Everyone has a version of who they think you are, or a perception. Your family, your friends, your students, your fans. But you're the one living your life. Who do you think you are?
I'm Hal Galper. I'm not what I do. I am who I am. I moved up here to the Catskill Mountains about 40 years ago. And up till the point where I just got this trio gig, nobody knew who I was. And I never talked about my career to anybody. Because as soon as you mention jazz musician, this set of attitudes automatically comes into play, and they look at you differently. They romanticize you. And I have no romantic inclinations to this business whatsoever. As soon as you start taking it, that's for somebody else, to be romantic about it. But I think I find that quite separating from people. As soon as that template, you're a jazz musician template starts to happen, I feel less connected to them. So mainly I'm just me. I'm not Hal Galper, the jazz musician. That's my job, and I'm not my job. So I suppose that's the best way I can answer that.
I like it. I like it.
I saw the lessons. Again, like I said earlier, there were lessons about what not to do. If you're, like when I was with Cannonball, this was like, towards the end of his career, he was falling apart. You know, he was not well and he was falling apart. And, we were, packing up. We had just played this Mafia club in Toronto and we were packing up. And the club was semi-dark, and they had Jazz at the Plaza album, Miles' Jazz at the Plaza. And Cannon was on, and the picture is burned indelibly in my brain. Cannon was sitting at this small round table with his alto on his knee, listening to how he used to play, and the look on his face was just stunning because. Wow. His identity, he had been Cannonball for so long, and his identity was based partially on his playing. Don't get me wrong, he was a great guy, he was a smart guy, generous guy, and all that. But, you know, during the Depression, all these guys were jumping out of windows in Wall Street because they lost their job and because their identities were based on their job, which is very weak. And that's probably one of the most basic lessons I learned is, you're not your job, you know. I mean, what are you going to do if you don't have a job? You're going to not have any identity, you know. So I've seen that happen before. It happened with Tony Williams, you know. But he got past it. It was pretty amazing. He had no childhood. I know him. I used to play with him, his dad, and played with Tony when he couldn't reach the pedals, you know, 10 years old. I think that's the biggest challenge is not depending on the music for your sense of security or your sense of self. You know, you are a person before you're a job. And I think that was probably one of the, you know, don't do this lessons that really stuck with me.
Those are great stories. Hal, thank you for taking some time out. It's a very surreal time on the planet. I appreciate you taking a minute out.
I appreciate you calling, and I miss Kansas City. When I went there and played with Bobby, it was just so much fun. I have a picture of me standing up to Bird, where the statue is on behind Vine Street there.
I've always wanted to talk to you, and I'm so glad I got a chance to. So, Hal, thank you. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, stay cool, and thanks for all the music, man. I've always been a big fan.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Boston, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Hal for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.